Oh boy, are we in for a doozy today. Because there is something that happened today that just triggered my brain into remembering a fundamental concept that I've been seeing in the industry um, that I'm just not a fan of. And it's re-releases, remakes, and remasters. There's a lot of times where I just find that a lot of this stuff is pointless, and I don't understand why we accept it in society so much and repay for it so much. Now, I want to clarify, I'm not talking about like the Spyro trilogy remaster or like the Crash Bandicoot remaster, because actually, in my opinion, those are the ones that are done right. They are ported from an older console system over to the new systems. It is three games in one game, and it costs not the premium price. You're not paying $50 to $70 for the game. You're paying almost like $30 or $40 for three games. And I think $10 a game, that's a pretty good price, especially in comparison to your other AAA game styles. So no, I'm not really talking about those, but I'm talking about more modern day franchises that are trying to capitalize on that concept in current time. So, just to get started, I do want to say that the first franchise I'm bringing up, I am only bringing it up because today that franchise decided to release something that that brought up the conversation. So no necessary hate to the franchise, but let's get right into it. So the franchise that is in question is Persona. The Persona franchise just released Persona 3 Reloaded today. February 2nd, it just got released, and people are already starting to play it and start to gain their feelings on it. But I just want to go through the timeline real quickly of Persona 3, like that third generation, and their history. So, Persona 3, the original base game, came out on July 13th, 2006. Okay, so that was a long time ago. That justifies it. That is a good enough chunk of a time period where a report might seem necessary. But then you kind of look into it, and not even a year later, they release Persona 3 FES, which essentially took Persona 3 from, I'm assuming, the PlayStation 1 and bringing it to the PlayStation 2, and it adds an epilogue. Now, I got that information from Game Rant. They just said, oh, it was a PlayStation 2 port, and that is what, and it had an epilogue. But that was the only difference. Besides that, it was pretty much the same game, and you're just repaying for the same game with just a little more content. And I don't think that content was worth buying the whole game again. So then, now to fast forward to today, now we have Persona 3 Reloaded, which is the same thing as the base game, but they really upped the graphics, and now we're going from all the way from the PS2 to the PS5. So yet again, multiple generation console jumps, so maybe it's not as bad as I'm leading it on to be, but also re-releasing the same game two times over is mind-boggling to me, especially when The Verge says that Persona 3 Reloaded is a full-on remake that is so close to being the definitive version of the game. What do you mean by definitive version of the game? To me, like, shouldn't the definitive version of the game be the first one you release? Like, I get if there's, like, little bugs or whatever, but overall, it's like, nothing crazy should be changing. And if you're saying it's close to the definitive version, does that mean we're gonna get a Persona 3 Reloaded? Are we gonna get a fourth iteration of this same game? I don't know. But let's move forward in Persona, and let's go to their most recent generation, which would be Persona 5. So you have Persona 5 the original, you have Persona 5 Strikers, Royal, and Tactica. And Persona does this thing where it likes to dip into different genres. So it doesn't want to be like turn-based. It also wants to be story. It also wants to be like I can't remember the name of the genre off the top of my head, but it does dabble in multiple different fields. But I was looking and I was like, what are the real difference between all of these different versions of Persona 5? So on Reddit, there was somebody that posted, if you just played the original Persona 5, playing Persona Royal after the original would be very dragging because you would have to spend 100 hours in Persona Royal before hitting new content. So you were paying for 100 hours of recycled content. And that is associated with the cost. You can't just say, oh, but there is more. And if you're justifying that the more is worth the price, then that is fine. But if the more is not much more, you are paying for the recycled content. And I just hope people understand that when they go and they buy from these different franchises. The saving grace of Persona 5 is at least they're releasing games. Like, they are releasing a new game, it feels like every year. So they're still very modern and very, like, in the field and putting boots to the ground and getting to work on making new games, or at least having something for your franchise fans to have fun playing while they wait for the next main game to come out. That could not be said for other franchises like Kingdom Hearts. That's just the example. That's the example I'm using. Now, another franchise that kind of falls along the same lines into this remake, re-release, remaster is Final Fantasy, where in between their new games, they will remaster and re-release older games and port them over to the new system. Which, yet again, I understand the framework for wanting to do that. But if you already own the older game, I really don't understand buying the same game with just upped quality. I would rather watch the upped quality version of the game and just replay the old game, especially if they have the same story. And especially because with these remasters, Final Fantasy is charging that premium. You're paying $50 to $70 for this game. So unless you have never played the game prior, if you haven't played the game prior, I feel like it justifies the price. But if you have played the game prior and it's the same story, it doesn't justify the price. Now, don't get me wrong, the quality of this game gets better drastically. It gets drastically better. But I would just watch it. I would just treat it like a movie, and I would just watch somebody else play it. I don't feel the need to play a game I have already played just for the better quality. Now, I talk about this franchise all the time, and I'm never going to stop talking about it. Pokemon falls under to the same exact issue. I mean, look at their remakes just in their main generations. You have Heart Gold Soul Silver, you have Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, you have Ultra Sun Ultra Moon, you have Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and you have the most recent Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Now, to me, some of these remakes are more justifiable than others. And I'm just going to quickly run through each game real quick and talk about like the little changes. So some of the little changes is for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which was originally just Gold and Silver. Gold and Silver was released for the Game Boy Color. Heart Gold and Soul Silver was released for the DS. But we have the DS Lite, which allows you to play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. So to me, they needed to provide a lot in order to justify purchasing a $30, $40 game that has already been released prior. And the things that they've done different were, and I don't even know if this was in the original game, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But in Heart Gold Soul Silver, after you beat the game, you then go back to Kanto, and then you could fight all of those gyms again. So it's like double the story in one. But yet again, you've already played Gen 1, hopefully, if you're playing Gold and Silver. So it's just another way. It's just more content, more hours to pour into the game. The other thing that Heart Gold and Soul Silver did was they did the little Poke Walk thing where you could take a Pokemon from your game and put it into this little like step tracker or whatever. And it was like almost like a Tamagotchi in a way. And you could also catch Pokemon using it and then bring the Pokemon that you have on your step tracker to the game. It was super gimmicky. I really don't know how many people used it when that was the case, when the game released. I mean, I didn't use it that much. and mine broke. So I don't know what really to say about that. I don't know if others broke really easy and quickly or died over time, but that was just the case for me. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire to me was actually one of the better re-releases and remakes because it took the Mega Evolution from Pokemon X and Y and brought it into Ruby and Sapphire. Also, we are going from a port of the DS to the 3DS, and the cartridges were different. So, though you could play the DS game in a 3DS, so yet again, but it was also a time where we went from Ruby and Sapphire being. Oh, Ruby and Sapphire was Game Boy too. What am I saying? Ruby and Sapphire was not DS. My apologies. That just pinged in my head, and my bad. But yeah, another Game Boy game that was also playable on the DS, and now it's getting ported over to the 3DS. And the 3DS did not have a Game Boy port, and the Ruby and Sapphire games went from 2D animation to 3D animation. So, to me, there was enough change. You added a whole new battling concept of Mega Evolution. You changed the graphic style from 2D to 3D, and you were going through multiple generations of consoles before re-releasing the game. Then you have Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which to me was, I wanted to say was the biggest joke, but there is something worse. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, to my knowledge, the only thing that they changed was they had the wormhole thing at the end of the game where you could catch every single legendary from every generation prior up until that point, which to me was super cool. I saw people spend hours upon hours upon hours getting their legendaries back or searching for shiny legendaries through that wormhole feature. If I knew Ultra Sun was going to come out and it was going to be the same game as regular Sun with just the wormhole thing, I would have never bought Pokemon Sun, hence why I didn't buy Ultra Sun. If I'm going to spend $40 on Pokemon Sun, I am not going to spend an additional $40 on Pokemon Ultra Sun with a slight variation of the legendary and the wormhole thing. To me, it just wasn't worth it enough. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Yet again, we're talking about a big jump in terms of port. Because we had that is a Gen 1 remake. So we're going all the way back from the Game Boy and going to the Nintendo Switch, which has fundamentally different types of cartridges. And Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee use the Pokemon Go mechanic where you would just throw balls at Pokemon. You would still have the typical when you fight your gym leader Pokemon battles, but in terms of catching Pokemon, they changed the way in which you catch Pokemon. It actually made it less grindy in terms of menu selection, but still grindy in the sense of you're fighting the same Pokemon and just catching them, releasing them, catching them, releasing them, and that kind of stuff. But overall, that was probably one of the better remakes, in my opinion. And then we have Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which in my opinion was an absolute joke. The only reason why I bought Brilliant Diamond was because I've never played Diamond and Pearl. So for me, I was just like, you know what? New system, new graphics, I'll give it a shot. But when the game is pretty much one-to-one with this chibi style art, to me, I didn't think it was worth it for anyone who has already played the game. So unless somebody else that consumed the game thought it was good enough and worth the value, good for you. To me, it just didn't hit the same. Now, Pokemon falls under to the same thing, the same fate as Persona, where beyond their main generation games, they also have a whole slew of other genre type games. And just for me to rattle off some examples, we got Rumble, we got Conquest, we got Ranger, we got Mystery Dungeon, we got Stadium, we got Snap, and more recently we got Legends Arceus. Which Legends Arceus, to me, is its own game. Yes, it is based on the Sinnoh region, but it was the prequel Sinnoh region where we had all new characters, all new stories, we integrated all. We had some new Pokemon, like one or two, but for the most part, it was all Pokemon that we've already seen before. But it changed the mechanic of how you catch Pokemon. You no longer have to initiate combat. You could just throw a ball at it, catch it, and then you're done, which I think was pretty cool. So there are some of those games that, to like Pokemon Ranger, you had to do the little circles in order to catch it. You're changing the mechanics of the game with a full new story. So some of them did seem justifiable. I just want to mention there is so much more out there than just the original generations. And then for my last group, I'm going to lump them all together because to me they're kind of all the same. I'm lumping all fighting games together. So I'm talking Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat. You could throw in Smash from Nintendo. The only one I'm not going to throw in is Injustice, because Injustice only had Injustice and Injustice 2. Injustice 2 came out in like 2017, so they really haven't been doing the same thing as these other franchises, but I'm sure if it picked up enough traction, they would start doing exactly what these companies are also doing. So the issue with these is there really is no change. It is the same gimmick over and over, re-release after re-release after re-release. Now, for the exception of the campaign story, can you really tell me it is worth spending $50 to $70 every single time for Mortal Kombat X, Mortal Kombat XL, Mortal Kombat 11, and Mortal Kombat 1? The only difference is the story. So if you don't mind just playing Mortal Kombat 10 and just watching somebody else play Mortal Kombat 1 the story, like I'll give Mortal Kombat 1 the benefit of the doubt. At least they did like this more like tag team style combat, so it's not always just a 1v1 and you're done type of thing. There are slight gimmick changes, but not enough for me to justify buying that game over and over and over again. The only major change, the only other big change in terms of those fighting games are the characters. Sometimes there's slight variations in the characters, but there's also DLC characters that you are paying for. You're paying even more money for. You're paying the base game of your $50 to $70, and then on top of that, you're buying DLC characters. So they're getting even more money out of you just for a character, and maybe for one short little extra storyline. And now I'm sure there's other video game franchises that do the same thing. These are the ones that just popped in my head first. Another one, if I were to dig in and try to pop into my head, is Call of Duty. Call of Duty is also notoriously horrible for this kind of stuff. They release a game, every year, every other year, but they're considered a AAA game, so it's $70 every single time now. It's the exact same mechanics. Sometimes you get a new gun. The only difference is the campaign. So unless you're a fan of the campaign, which a lot of people sometimes aren't, is it really worth buying it? I mean, you're really only buying it for the multiplayer mode. So unless you like playing competitive, I would rather play casually playing Call of Duty Ghosts than playing Black Ops 4 or whatever, or Modern Warfare 2 or whatever the new one is out right now. But to kind of wrap this all up, I'm sure the question is, hey, video games aren't the only ones that do this. I mean, look at the movie industry. Look at when we moved from VHSs to DVDs to Blu-ray, now to streaming even. You are buying the same content over and over and over again. And it's actually worse, especially in the DVD era, and especially when it comes to animated movies, because how many times have you seen where it's like, oh, they released the movie, then they have the like special edition, then they have the platinum edition, then they have the diamond edition, where it's like maybe if it's an animated movie, the quality is upped a little bit, or if it's a live action movie, maybe the resolution is a little better. I don't know how they really do that, but maybe. But besides that, the only major difference of the editions are the extra behind the scenes stuff, which to me is kind of garbage, because a lot of it you could just find elsewhere. You don't need to actually buy the same movie over again to watch those behind the scenes stuff. There are plenty of hours of behind the scenes footage that exist on YouTube that you could just watch anytime you want. So to me, the movie industry in that case is just as bad as video games. So I don't want it to I don't want it to seem like video games are the only ones at fault. At the end of the day, all these industries just want to make money, and it's just, are we willing to buy into it? Which for the most part, it still seems like as a consumer base, we are willing to pay for the same thing over again. So yeah, hey, I mean that's pretty much it. That's all I got. If you don't agree with me, if you agree with me, let me know. This is basically the end of the video. So if you made it all the way to the end of the video, a like and subscribe can go a long way. So feel free to give that to me if you so choose to do so, and I will catch you on the next one.